Hi friends, I hope that you are doing wonderful today. In today's video, we are going to be doing a brief jump doc read through of What We Do in the Shadows by Valeria. Valeria is a legendary jump maker across most jump chain communities. They make extremely well-known, very detailed jumps that are lots of fun to read through. Even if you are unfamiliar with the setting, their most well-known jumps are probably the Type Moon jumps. They have a series of jumps that they call Fate's Legends, which is about different regions of the Type Moon version of Earth and different eras in Type Moon's Earth's history. If you are familiar with the Nasuverse and the Fates series, you could probably understand how significant it is that some of Valeria's jumps involve different ages, because that setting's version of Earth has a very prominent history, and the age that you are born in and that you are the most active in is definitely something worth keeping in mind if you ever go to that setting. But as some minor stuff before we get started, today is my birthday. I am making a video today anyway, in addition to possibly doing a live stream later today, because making videos is my dream career. I do want to become a professional YouTuber, and in addition to that, I am both chronically ill and physically disabled, so doing regular work is not the easiest thing for me to do. So if you enjoy the things that you have seen on my channel, please leave a like and subscribe. That is tremendously helpful for getting me boosted by the algorithm, and also for helping me reach my goal of eventually hitting 1,000 subscribers, becoming fully monetized, and having just a fun time as a YouTuber, as like a career. Additionally, I have links in the description of this video if you like the stuff that I make and you want to throw me a birthday tip. That would be incredibly appreciated, because as I mentioned earlier, doing work is a little bit tricky for me. So I am often not always the best off financially. Any and all amounts are tremendously helpful. Let's go ahead and dive right on into What We Do in the Shadows. For those of you who are unfamiliar with What We Do in the Shadows, this is an urban fantasy show. I have watched it on Hulu. I don't know how else other people watch it. I believe it is an FX show. It is urban fantasy, which means that it is set in a modern world. It is set in a modern supernatural version of Earth, where monsters are real and are readily encounterable. They interact with humans regularly. There is a sort of informal veil where no one really believes in vampires, but also at the same time, the show's main gimmick is that there is a documentary that is being done on vampires, so it's obvious that the rules of the veil in this particular world, the rules of the masquerade, are not super strictly enforced, and no one particularly cares. It's just that humans, for a range of reasons, don't believe in the supernatural, as a matter of fact. Later on in the show, non-human, non-vampire supernatural creatures begin to make more and more appearances. The one issue with this jump, and it's a minor issue, is that it was obviously made pretty early on into the show's runtime. In fact, the show is still going on, and season 5 at least began earlier this year. It's entirely possible that they've actually already aired every episode in season 5. I believe that they have, but I might be wrong, so don't quote me on that. But that said, we are going to go ahead and dive on into this jump. This is a regular origined jump, which means that there's different origins. I don't believe that the items are split up into origins, though. For your locations, you can start anywhere on Earth that you want to start. If you want to be involved with the main character's shenanigans, I recommend going to the New York area, because that is where the central events of the show take place. That said, if you want to be involved in a lesser role, you could also go to New Zealand and become a part of the documentary crew. That said, it's worth noting that there are some vampiric weaknesses that vampires suffer from in the setting, one of the most notable of which is the sun. Although this does not affect every vampire, there is a type of vampire called an energy vampire, which, if I remember correctly, is not negatively affected by the sun. They do have supernatural abilities, some of which are very odd, and if I start talking about them, they will go into spoiler territory for the show, which I don't want to do. But just keep that in mind when you are deciding your build and your setup for this jump. The 3 origins are the newbie, modernized man, and old school. The age of your in-jump character is going to be determined by the origin that you select, so keep that in mind. But your gender is something you may decide yourself. With newbie, which is based off of a character from season 1, you were just turned earlier the night that the jump starts. Your sire has vanished. You don't know where they are. Fortunately, this does give you a sort of conditional luck boost that makes it so that you are able to find housing that will allow you to get by without worrying about being destroyed by something unintentional, or by your roommates at the very least, as long as you don't intentionally personally antagonize them, because your roommates are going to be people who know what you are and are cool with you. Modernized man makes it so that you are a vampire who has been around for a while. You are not ancient by any means, given the ages of some of the other vampire characters in this setting, but you are decently experienced. It's entirely possible that some other vampires know about you and are aware of any reputation you've built for yourself as a sort of background thing. It's also worth noting that with this particular origin, you are somewhat injured and your vampire powers are around the level of a newbie, but you will eventually grow back to your original power. There is a similar condition for the old school vampires, and it's worth noting that, like, part of the reason why this is that vampire strength and vampire abilities can vary pretty significantly between the different vampires on the show. Later on, it's revealed that some vampires do in fact have some sort of powerful ability. I don't remember if it's like a universal thing where every vampire has some sort of unique traits, or if it's something that's pretty rare, but I do know for a fact that at least one of the characters in the show has some pretty significant powers. And also, vampires do have vampire abilities. They can do things like shapeshift. They can charm people. They have some level of superhuman strength. But with old school, you are an ancient primordial vampire, and your exact age is up to you. It's pretty like nebulous up here, but it's pretty clear that you are ancient. You are ancient beyond reckoning, to the point of you've lived for entire millennia, almost certainly multiple, even if you want to try and be at the younger side of things, because you were born before Rome became an empire. So you've definitely been around for a while, and that is something to keep in mind when you are trying to decide what sort of vampire you want to be. Now we're going to go ahead and dive on into the perks. There are no generalized perks as far as I remember, at the very least the last time I read this document, although there might be now, so if there are, that's cool. But with the newbie, we begin with the here's how it's done. This makes it so that you are really good at getting people acclimated to new situations, which can be incredibly handy, especially if you've actually seen the show. You know that the ability to get people acclimated to new situations would stop a large number of the conflicts that are happening over the course of the show. Respect your elders, it's worth it, is a handy perk that makes it so that you are able to more easily get along with older people, especially elders or superiors, and they're always happy to show you the ropes and teach you some hints and tricks. So definitely consider that perk if you're going into a brand new setting and you want to find some way to survive the first couple of nights or the first few months in a setting, especially if it is a drastically different setting than any you've ever been to. The mask is too real, makes it so that the more you act within the tropes for whatever pop culture elements of what you are, the closer you'll actually get to those tropes. Even when that should be really weird, even if you are even if pretending to be a seductive vampire would normally be cringe, you would find some way to make it work. At the same time, if you were a werewolf and you wanted to act more like a barbarian, that would actually allow you to get physically stronger and physically more imposing over time. The capstone perk for this origin is called Getting It, and this is a very incredible perk for if this is your first vampire jump, which this is probably the best first vampire jump. This is certainly the jump that I would recommend for baby's first vampire jump other than generic vampire. And with this perk, you are aware of every little detail of your new condition, and this is something that carries forward into other settings and other species as well. So if you were to go from this jump to a let's say a theoretical Doctor Who jump, and you were to become a Dalek, you would understand everything about that species thanks to this perk, because this applies to all future stuff that you get as well. And it's also retroactive, so if you were a werewolf from generic werewolf and you didn't know every detail of that, you would know it now. Just something to keep in mind. Modernized man, the first perk is called Flat Responsibilities, and this makes it so that you are going to be able to make sure that other people are more considerate to you. They'll do their chores, they might help you out every now and again, and they'll be willing to do you favors, so long as you yourself treat them like people. Obviously, if you're a giant dick, this perk won't help you, but if you do your best, this could be a very helpful perk. Keep the sheets white is a perk so that you will always be clean. This could be very handy if your jumper is a fashionista, or if your jumper relies on elegance for whatever reason, and you are in situations that would normally be reliably inelegant, such as if you are a vampire and you are feeding on someone. That kind of thing can be messy. At the same time, if you're running through a jungle or a desert, you would be able to use this perk to stay clean in a wide range of ways. Very cool. Sneaky Bats, which is the third perk in the Modernized Man origin, makes it so that you need to be able to, when you need to disguise your true nature, you are very good at that. This is also a very handy perk for just being a vampire in general. Just from the name and from the very brief description, you could probably already tell that this is helpful, but this is a perk that makes it so that you could be an excellent spy. It's a perk that makes it so that people won't be suspicious of your comparative youth if you've lived in a place for decades and decades, and it shouldn't be possible for someone to live in a place for decades and decades and still look the same age as when they first arrived. This is just a very good general vampire perk, but also it's a very good general immortal perk. Highly recommend. Proactivity makes it so that you are able to figure out some way around a vulnerability of yours, which is another incredibly handy vampire perk if you do not have something that nullifies your weaknesses. And those kinds of perks can often be very expensive, so I don't know how often I would recommend getting perks that completely eliminate a weakness of yours, especially if it's an alt form specific weakness, since there are perks like this that gives you the ability to think of ways around certain weaknesses. It's also worth noting that there is a perk somewhat similar to this in the Ash Vampire line over in the Lords of the Night Vampires jump, which makes it so that you are able to deal with your weaknesses for a certain amount of time, so long as it's not like a super intense example of a weakness, and as long as you stay moving until you're in a place where you're no longer vulnerable. This is probably a better perk generally, because that other perk has like specific stipulations that make it less useful, but with this one you could just figure out ways that allow you to work around some of your weaknesses, like silver or mirrors or the sun. Now we're going to go ahead and go over to the last origin. The last origin is called Old School, and it begins with Best Friends Forever. This is a perk that makes it so that your friendships are not quite fiat backed, but they're much harder to overcome, whether it is you being better at overcoming like little arguments or whatever, or just your friends staying your friends even if you are not in contact with them for long periods of time, which can certainly be the case with vampires and other immortals, and it can also be the case in frantic or hectic situations, like if you go to a war and you're not able to contact your homie for a long time. Just a nice quality of life friendship perk, which is always good. The 200 choice points perk for Old School is a personalized version of the free perk from the newbie jump, which from the newbie origin, in the sense that it makes it so that you are able to keep up with the times and you're able to adjust to life in the modern world just fine. This is a very handy perk for if your jumper likes to jump from setting to setting, and it's also just a very good first jump perk, broadly speaking. In fact, this is actually a jump that could very easily be a first jump, because the setting is not wildly dangerous as long as you yourself are not incredibly goofy and as long as you don't stack it up with drawbacks. The 400 choice point perk for this particular origin is Medieval Mayhem, and this makes it so that you are very good at handling yourself in a medieval way. You are very good at things like horse combat and using medieval weapons. It can be very handy because lots of different jump settings take place in that era, but it's also very handy for if you go to a setting where you are someone who is facing a force of enemies either from the future or who are effectively from the future, and they have better technology than you, but you still need to find some way to survive. Just very handy overall. The final perk for this particular origin is called Bat Sense, and it is a danger sense perk, so that is very handy. This is a capstone perk, and as such it is very powerful. You'll know an hour in advance when something threatening your life is approaching, but it will take 59 more minutes before you realize for sure what it is and where it's coming from. And that said, a minute is a lot of time to prepare. Whether you are a new jumper or an old jumper, if you reliably have the ability to sense where danger is coming from up to a minute in advance, and actually if you have the general sense an hour in advance, that is a ton of time. And if you know precisely where it's coming from in a minute and you've had an hour to get ready, you will definitely be able to handle whatever is going to come your way. So this is a perk that I solidly recommend, especially as a first jump perk. That said, now we're going to go ahead and move on over to the items. There are no discounts in the items, which is sad. I was correct when I mentioned earlier that this jump does not have origin-based items. Period outfits makes it so that you have clothing that fits whatever era you originally came from. That said, if you are anything but a newbie, that is not going to be incredibly handy unless you have a career that allows you to use those sorts of outfits in some way, such as being a cosplayer, working at a Ren fair, or doing some sort of reenactment type things. So definitely keep that in mind. Historical person makes it so that you have a background that people know about in the jump. You've had books written about you, art painted of you, and maybe even some music inspired by you. Obviously, the older you are, the more of this there'll be, and the more varied the styles will be. But if you're a newbie, you'll still have this, but it'll look like you probably ordered it yourself, unless you give yourself an origin where you are something of a minor celebrity, which there's nothing here that really states that you can't do that as a newbie, but obviously that would come with its own unique set of difficulties, because a lot of the benefits of being a famous person would be counteracted by the drawbacks of being a vampire and vampiric weaknesses. So it's definitely something you want to think about before you do. Torture Chamber is a perk that makes it so that it's an item that makes it so that wherever home you have a room underground where you have tools that allow you to do fun or not fun stuff to people depending on your perspective and their perspective. It could be the underground a property you own, or it could be underneath your warehouse. And it's soundproof, so that's a lot of cool stuff. Coffin it's just a coffin. It's a very comfy, secure coffin that you can use to sleep during the day, because this jump definitely assumes that you are a vampire, because this jump makes you a vampire no matter which origin you choose. Even the newbies become vampires effectively the minute they enter the setting. So it would take a truly incredible amount of skill either in jump or through some sort of perk-based shenanigans to get out of being a vampire in this setting. And again, I definitely think that you should take on a vampiric form for this jump, and then you have a vampire as like an alt form moving forward, which would be incredibly handy. Home Sweet Home makes it so that you have a house that you can live in, or some sort of housing situation that would already be set up for all your vampiric needs, which can be incredibly handy because, as I mentioned before, there are plenty of vampiric weaknesses in this setting, most notably the sun. So obviously staying out of daylight is very important. Blood banks makes it so that you have a portable supply of food. This food is not fantastic, but it fills to capacity once a week, and it's the stuff that you need. So this is this is just a nifty item if you plan to do a vampire based jump chain and you actually want to have the weaknesses that vampires are supposed to have and have to deal with that. Just fun overall. Medieval Armory is it's an arsenal of medieval weapons. There isn't anything super special about this. It's worth noting that the armory itself takes up space in whatever property you own, and there's a secret passage that leads to it that's very hard for anyone else to find, although it's not impossible, so definitely keep that in mind and be prepared to make accommodations to actually make it impossible if you have the right abilities, such as if you can turn incorporeal and you could go through things, just stuff like that. Party tickets is a very nice item that makes it so that you have 9 tickets in total to the yearly party held in your area. This party will be held in any population center that you are in the setting, and lots of the supernatural community will make an appearance. Humans are not allowed unless they're familiars, pets, or food. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term familiar in a vampire context, it effectively means a vampire servant. A vampire's servant who is most often a human and who has been promised immortality in exchange for service for a usually definite, though not always definite, period of time, after which the vampire will turn them into a vampire. There are familiars in a wide range of vampire stories, and familiars are actually a pretty significant part of the plot of what we do in the shadows. So keep that in mind. This is just the ability to enter a supernatural party that's held once a year, and the supernatural party will be held once a year in future settings that you go to, and every year you get 9 tickets. So just a very cool thing to keep in mind. Humans can make appearances under an array of circumstances, such as them being involved members of the supernatural community, them just being strong, or them having some sort of powerful tie to a supernatural being, such as a vampire or a werewolf. Bite Club is a super popular nightclub for both humans and vampires. It is the capstone item for this particular jump. It is very handy, and it is a free profit type item that also serves as like an adventure hook, which is one of my favorite types of free profit items. As long as you own it, you'll be getting money, you'll be able to do cool stuff with it. It will follow you into future settings, but it actually won't follow you like one-to-one. You'll just gain ownership of a similar club in future settings. And obviously, if you are in a setting that does not have any supernatural elements, and you do not have perks which allow you to transform a setting, a mundane setting, into a supernatural setting, then you'll just own a really rad nightclub that people come to and is just normal and is a great feeding ground for you and anyone you turn, but is not necessarily necessarily magical, just a neat nightclub. All right, we are now going to move forward. We are in the companions section. It's worth noting that there are two options that are of note here. There's the canon option, which is just one of the characters from this particular setting that you've befriended, and then there's the familiar companion, which is a companion who serves you, and they're a normal person, a normal human, who is convinced that you'll grant them immortality in exchange for service. Although they could just like serving a vampire, but regardless, they're a loyal human servant, and that's a really handy thing to have given the pretty strict limitations of being a vampire in the setting, unless you are something like an energy vampire. And it is just very handy to have someone who can go out during the day and can do stuff for you and help you out in a wide range of ways. As usual, we're not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about drawbacks, but here they are. I do want people to be able to look at them and see them. I think it's pretty cool that there is a wide range of drawbacks here. One of the ones that one of the ones that is of note is werebites. In some settings, being a werewolf is a very powerful weapon against vampires. Werewolf venom or something in the werewolf bite is usually deadly to vampires in some vampire stories. In this particular setting, it is not. But in this particular setting, with this particular drawback, you will suffer from an incurable, weakened version of lycanthropy. You will be a very furry person, and when the moon is out, especially when the full moon is out, you'll be pissed off, but you won't have all the cool wolf form stuff. Your weaknesses to silver is going to be far more pronounced than it otherwise would be, so keep that in mind. That could effectively one-shot you if you're not careful. And you might want to get some sturdy chains to make sure that you don't do anything you regret when the full moon is out. But this isn't like the worst drawback in the world. It's just something that definitely makes it so that you have to be a lot more careful in the setting. That said, now here is the ending. There is also a notes page. Here is the notes page for anyone who wants to glance at it. And yeah, this is a very fun jump. It is honestly a hilariously safe first jump if you want a first jump that grants you some level of supernatural power. So definitely keep that in mind for if you've decided to go on a jump chain but you don't know where to begin and you don't want to do Pokemon or generic first jump. This is probably the most supernatural setting that I would recommend as a first jump, although there are a couple of others that are solidly supernatural. There is the drawback filled version of Chronicle, which honestly still makes a very safe first jump, because you will have had 5 years to prepare for it before stuff starts to hit the fan. And there's a couple of generic supernatural jumps that I might recommend that are supposed to be safe and are fairly safe, but if you want a canon supernatural heavy non-generic jump, this is probably the one I would visit. I do recommend What We Do in the Shadows as a show. It is for mature audiences, so keep that in mind. There is some dark humor and some like kind of sick looking stuff in ways that are both fun and not fun. But if you've never seen it and you have Hulu, which is how I watch it, I definitely recommend you check it out. That said, I'm going to go ahead and let everyone go. I've had a lot of fun filming this video. I can't wait to talk to you all later. Bye-bye.